Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tal. You can also find me on Facebook in the Sorcerers Guild. Today on Magical Theory, we are going to talk about vampires and the concept of vampiricy. We will be starting out with the historical mythology of what a vampire was originally intended to be and how to deal with this type of phenomenon in the modern world and why this concept can be quite interesting to us as sorcerers. From there, we will then continue on to the more modern idea of energy vampires, how to identify someone who has been afflicted with this condition, and how to protect ourselves from them. We will not be getting into this psychological idea of energy vampires. I did a little bit of research over the last little while on energy vampires before I did this video, just to see if there was anything important that I was missing out. And I came across this a lot, this idea of these psychological energy vampires that take your mental energy with taking up your attention, things like that. We're not going to be talking about those. We are actually talking about physical life force energy and the people that are afflicted with the condition that makes them need to reach out to others to pull in that energy. We'll also discuss how to alleviate this condition, as well as how to actually draw energy from a source yourself, as in other people, crowd of people. Well, there are many different sources we can draw energy from. We will discuss a bit on that, how to use that energy once you have drawn it into yourself, as well as a few other tips and tricks that I have picked up in this area over the years. Okay, so let's start with the mythological idea of what a vampire was originally intended to be, or believed to be. This was not something that typically one created intentionally. Okay, so originally the vampire is the hungry dead. This would be someone who has recently died, and for some reason their body was not treated properly, is usually the superstition, and their spirit stays alive within the body rather than crossing over, and then that spirit requires energy to keep the body vital, so then begins feasting upon people that it knew in life, those people that it has a connection to. Typically, some of these stories involve people that it hasn't been attached to, but often the story will be that a person dies, often of consumption, whatever what consumption was. I don't believe we actually know in the modern era what that was, but typically people that died of consumption, and then even that very night or the next night, they would then begin being sighted, and people would be having most often dreams about this person coming to them and sucking their blood, and they would wake up sometimes with marks on them, but also often very groggy and have very little energy. And then of course they would then go dig up the corpse of this person and find that the body was perhaps more lifelike than expected. Often, almost always, the fingernails and the hair would be found to continue growing. We know now that that particular part, at least, is something that the body does do. After death, the hair and fingernails will continue to grow for a while. Some of these stories talk about poking the body and blood springing forth as if the person was still alive. Supposedly, modern science can explain this as well, and even some of the stories of the person not having any rigor mortis and their joints still being loose and limber. Supposedly, sorry, felt like something was on my face there. Supposedly, science can explain all of these things, but that's neither here nor there. What's interesting to us in this story is the idea of the spirit itself. Now, one thing that seems to be lacking in most of these stories is the ground isn't always disturbed. Often they will have to dig the coffin up. It's not like they go there and there's evidence of a body having physically crawled up out of the ground to go do this feasting on blood. It seems more like in these stories, and I'm going to get to that in a moment, and where this applies and where this concept applies to necromancy. It seems more like in these stories that perhaps it was the spirit rising up out of the body and then drawing energy from the person in their dreams and bringing that energy, and then transmuting that energy into vital essence and actually using it to maintain the corpse to some extent, so that the Ka spirit has a vessel to stay in. Okay, so of course in these old stories they would burn this corpse. They would dig up the body, which I said they would have to dig it up. They would dig up the body, cut it into pieces, burn it, do whatever superstitious thing they believed, but they destroyed the body and it would end. So they destroyed the vessel. So what is this vampire? I believe that we still experience these types of things. They're not perhaps not as fatal to us or even as draining, but we often hear these things of sleep paralysis or even parasites coming to us in our dreams. These things still kind of happen, just not on the same degree. And what this is, specifically in the case of the vampire, is someone whose soul is not crossed over properly. With a lot of your ghosts, what's happened is there's the Ka spirit that isn't all that's left. We have some of the residual soul itself still in the body. Now, okay, in previous videos, I talk about the idea of the soul on the astral plane, and then we have the physical body, and the link between these two, between the soul and the body-soul interaction, generates an energy field, which we typically call the aura during life. After death, this energy then becomes the Ka. It is the residual energy left after that interaction. When we have a vampire, what has happened is, for some reason, part of the soul itself, its attention is still lingering on the body. This is someone who really has not crossed over. So part of their actual self, their soul, has maintained the link. And that is why often in these cases, burning the body and destroying the vessel severed that link and got rid of the problem. Now, we can't do that in the modern age, yeah? Nobody's going to allow us to dig up a body and sever the link by destroying the corpse. The reason this thing is not as common as it used to be is because there's not belief in it. Back in the day, people believed this could happen, and especially people that were dying of disease, they just didn't quite cross all the way over, and they believed they could do this, so it animated the Ka, and then that spirit could go out and drain blood, or not literally drain blood, but drain life force from living people to keep their own vital essence of the body and maintain that connection. So how do we sever it nowadays? What we have to do then is, well, we could go to the cemetery itself and do a severing there, find a way to sever the link from there, which would be fairly easy. One could probably just recite the person's name and then summon that vampiric spirit up from its vessel in the ground and demand that it cross over, or convince it to cross over. Worst case scenario, I have actually found that we can use the S1 sigil, not exactly as a weapon, but to push a soul into crossing over. Once they get over there, you're not going to be able to contain them or do them any harm. But it is a way, if you actually imagine the sigil and then cast it towards the being, you actually can force it to cross over. I've actually had to do this a couple times since I've been using the sigil recently, and it works. You can actually do that. So you would summon, you could go to the grave, summon up the spirit from the body, which is now its vessel, and give it leave to cross over, or force that crossing over through the method that I described, or perhaps some sort of banishing. Perhaps a banishing on the tomb would probably work as well. I have not actually stood over a grave and encountered this type of condition myself, but this is how it works. So, information useful to us as sorcerers. We can actually draw vampiric spirits to us, and some people choose to work with these spirits and offer them energy in exchange. Now, we can replenish our energy, yeah? Whenever we cast spells, whenever we are doing a working, we are using this very same life force energy. When I tell you to draw energy from your chest, down your arms, into your hands, and into the spell, it's that very same energy that these vampiric spirits are after. And as long as you don't allow them to draw too much, you can replenish that energy and it won't actually harm you. So there's no physical problem with working with these types of spirits as long as you keep it within bounds. And they can teach you quite a bit about the concept itself of how to draw energy from people. So they can be a very useful tool. On to the concept of energy vampires. What is an energy vampire? Now, I mentioned with these astral vampires, these souls that still have that slight link to the material plane, that there is a misalignment between the astral body still being slightly connected to the material form. With someone who is an actual energy vampire, and that is someone who cannot produce the proper amount of life force energy from that interaction, that body-soul interaction, does not generate a large enough aura to actually keep the connection going. And these people then need to draw that energy from somewhere else. And these are where you get your energy vampires. Now, like I said, and there may be, there's definitely some connection there about these people with these psychological tricks to draw in your mental energy and your focus and your attention. Energy vampires do use this, yeah? I said that we're not going to talk about that. We're not. I'm not going to get into the psychology of it. But they definitely can use your attention to help draw your draw your life force in. If you are talking to the person, if you are making a connection to them, that connection, that link, allows you to more easily harvest that energy. Now, the more important part is that these people often find it easiest to draw in negative energy. Most of the people that I have actually met in this category, they tend to be fairly masochistic people, and in fact quite narcissistic, and that they want to create negative emotions in you because these are the easiest things to feed upon. So these people you're going to have other reasons not to want to be around them often, because they will mess with your mind. They will do things to agitate you so that they can feed off of that energy. This isn't always just like the classic idea of someone who is a literal predator, like a sexual harassment type of thing. But those type of people, they're definitely feeding off of that energy. This people that that do the sexual harassment of women, stuff like that. That's a type of energy vampirism. They're definitely feeding off of that energy. But It's not the only type. The people that like to constantly annoy and just generally harass. These people are feeding off of that energy as well. And an energy vampire then is someone who that energy is misaligned. And in order to alleviate this symptoms, all you then need to do is to correct that misalignment. And this can be done quite simply, and something I actually talked about in the last video. And those of you who have been following me through the videos over time are going to be very familiar that I'm always bringing up the idea of the personal sigil. And in the last video even, I talked about charging your personal sigil with your blood. Well, if you are someone who suffers from this condition, drawing your personal sigil in your blood with the intent of creating the body-soul alignment will help. You probably have to do it more than once. This is something that goes on over time. That's why I didn't say cure yourself of vampiricy. I said that this can alleviate the symptoms. And how one would do that is to, probably not every day, because I don't know how much blood it's going to take to draw your sigil, if it's not that complex. Perhaps come up with a more simplified version of your personal sigil if the one you have originally designed is fairly complex. And then you can use the diabetic pin, get that little bit of blood, and draw your sigil with the intent of facilitating the body-soul interaction, and continue that over time. And this will aid in getting over that misbalance, and eventually over time allow you to produce your own auric energy so that you don't have to feed on other people to get that energy. Because I realize not everyone that is afflicted with this condition wants to be cruel to people. And not everyone that has it is. Some people find that energy through other ways. They find ways to make people happy and are able to feed off of that. So in that case, perhaps it's not such a bad thing. And some of these people even are just good shoulders to cry on. Yeah? And they can feed off of that negative energy about you telling them how bad your day was. So it's not all bad. And perhaps that is another way to alleviate this condition, is find ways to get that energy without actually harming the other person. And again, as I mentioned when I was talking about working with vampiric spirits, this energy does come back over time. Yeah, we replenish this energy. So within limits, this isn't even all that harmful. Okay, so that'll take us on to the next step. This idea of using vampiricy. How do we draw energy from other people? Well, obviously, as I have discussed, the first thing is creating that link. Often we can get people to cooperate with this idea. And in fact, this is one way to do a group spell, is if the person in the center is drawing energy, everyone else's energy to them. This is essentially vampiricy, because we are pulling the energy into ourselves and then using it. So if everyone in the circle is imagining charging themselves up, and this is a way to keep us all on the same page in a group working, is that everyone on the outside will simply be focusing on the type of energy that has been agreed to be focused, and they can be focusing their energy and actually imagining it going into the person in the center, who would then be harnessing that energy and casting the spell themselves by imagining that energy drawing into them and then out into the spell as it's being cast. Of course, not everyone is going to be such a willing target. I'm not going to get a lot into the predatory aspects of it, but anytime you are having a conversation with someone, you can draw energy from them, because there is a connection, especially if there's eye contact. And you don't have to provoke the negative reaction necessarily. Like I said, you can actually create joy. This is a good method. Time that you are in making a connection to somebody, you actually can draw energy from them. I don't recommend that we go doing this all the time, because then people will feel exhausted around you. As long as you're not drawing too much or intentionally provoking negative reactions from a person, you're not really doing them much harm. So you can then, so if you want to do this, you can draw the energy from that person and then actually just imagine a storage container, giving that energy a form to be contained in. And it doesn't have to be a physical object. Some people actually have crystals that when they're doing this, they will hold the crystal and imagine the energy being pulled in. The same as when we're pushing energy out. Stuttering a lot tonight for some reason. The same as when we are pushing energy out. What we require simply visualization of it coming out. When we are drawing energy in, it's the same thing. Simple visualization. You imagine you visualize the part of the person that you are connecting to. I would usually, if I'm doing this type of thing, eye contact if we're drawing it from a single individual, and just visualize that energy being drawn into you and from them and into you. Like I said, I usually imagine it through the eye contact if I was to do this sort of thing. And there's a lot of glamour work that can be done in this aspect. It's not exactly the most ethical work, so we're not going to get a lot into that. Like I said, I'm not going to focus on teaching people how to be predators with this video. That isn't of interest to me. Okay, so you can draw that energy in and then imagine a form to contain that energy inside of yourself, or you can actually carry your crystal. The more productive and less harmful version of this is to draw from crowds. Go to concerts and you can actually draw the particular energy from the excitement of the concert. You can go anywhere. You can go to any location, and places themselves have an energy to them. And you can actually draw that energy into yourself simply by visualizing it coming in. You can imagine something reaching out to grab it and then drawing in, but that actually is slightly counterproductive. You want to actually just imagine the energy being pulled into you. Yeah? These people that are afflicted with the energy vampirism, that's part of what it causes, is this suction. So you want to actually visualize that energy being drawn towards you. If you need extra visualization to make it more powerful, you can actually imagine yourself as an empty vessel and draw that energy in like a vacuum and suck it into the either imagined or physical form that you are creating, and storing that energy in to be used at a later date. Or you can draw it in and then immediately use it. The most convenient way, if you're going to use it immediately, is simply through Sigil Craft. Or you can even, if it has an object, you can actually draw the sigil on beforehand and then go somewhere where the type of energy that you want to charge the sigil with is available. For example, if you were to create a sigil to draw love, you would then make the sigil. If you were going to use this method, make the sigil, take it with you, and then go to somewhere romantic, somewhere where there are people being in love, perhaps somewhere where weddings are performed, and walk around in that area around the weddings being performed. Or, don't go disturbing people's weddings, but if you can be close to the wedding chapel and near where the people are celebrating as they go outside, perhaps, throwing the rice, and the people run out to the car all excited, and you can actually draw some of that energy into the sigil and charge it that way. Now, one thing I want to make sure I mention on this is, if you are using the technique where you imagine yourself as a hollow vessel, make sure that after you have pulled the energy, to then cancel that visualization and return your astral form to normal. I would suggest, once again, using your personal sigil. You don't need to draw it in blood. If you're doing this a lot, might not be a bad idea to, if you're actually changing into that hollow form a lot, it might be a good idea just to keep the body-soul interaction intact, to occasionally draw your sigil in your own blood, but it isn't necessarily to do that every time. However, simply visualizing your sigil back into your body and imagining yourself solid, and then imagining your personal sigil on yourself, is a good way to return from that hollow point. Okay, so let's see. What haven't we covered here? We've covered energy vampires. We haven't actually covered how to identify when this is going on. We've hinted at it. Obviously, a lot of times these people, you will feel drained around them. And these people often are going to really like eye contact. Because like I said, that's the easiest way to draw. Someone that is actually doing this is going to want to be looking you in the face a lot. So they're going to be wanting to make contact with your eyes. They may use a lot of physical touch, but they want your attention. They want to create that link. And then once they have that link, you will actually feel drained after getting around these people. And if you become familiar with the technique, you're actually going to feel it. You'll know. Yeah? If you have drained energy from other people and you've get familiar with this idea of moving energy back and forth, you can feel it. For those of us that practice, really, it's pretty easy to identify an energy vampire because you will feel them connecting to you. So, what do we do about it? Well, one of the things that you need to understand here, and this is extremely important as well if you're going to be ever drawing energy from another person. One of the things you need to understand here is the person drawing energy is always at a disadvantage. They are on the receiving end. If you are aware of what they are doing, you now have the advantage and can alter that energy as it goes out to them in any way that you see fit. So, once you become aware of it, you are now the one in control of the exchange. You can simply cut it off by simply imagining a wall around yourself. Some of these energy vampires are pretty good at getting around that though and still drawing your attention. So we can actually use physical acts to prevent that. One is break the eye contact, but the most powerful one really is simply this. You can also cross your arms, but that's a little suspicious, I suppose, unless you do it like this. But if you cross your arms or your fingers like this, while imagining your aura becoming closed off, it becomes closed off. It becomes like a wall around you, and they cannot penetrate that energy and pull away from you as long as you cross your arms, fingers, or even your legs. I sit around with my legs crossed often. In other videos I have mentioned that I like to cross my legs during meditation. That is a little bit different because you are not imagining the aura becoming closed off when you cross your fingers or legs or whatever part of you decide to cross. Fingers being the most subtle of the three. That is the most blunt way to deal with an energy vampire. Again, like I said, you are in control of the interaction, so you can actually then limit what they are getting or begin sending curse work towards them through that link, or even negative energy in you that you want to get rid of. I mean, they're going to try and pull energy from you. You now have a chance to dump all that negative into them. There are several options that one can take there. Okay, so let's see. What else haven't we covered? Okay. I'm not going to encourage the drinking of blood because there are a lot of potential harms that can be done there. So we're not going to talk about that at all, about blood ingestion and how to use that for spell work or anything. Those things do exist. If you want that information, it is available out there. I'm not going to discuss that in the public forum. Okay, so what is left to talk about besides that is... oh, what to do with this energy once we have drawn it in. As I said, we can charge it in a sigil. We can imagine it into a... imagine it into a form, like a vase or whatever we want to imagine, and then actually store it within ourselves, or we can draw it into a crystal. And then when we are casting, and keep in mind that the type of energy they are putting out is the type of energy that it's going to be unless you transmute it somehow. By that I mean visualize the energy changing shape. Yeah, if they have a bunch of positive, happy energy that you've pulled into yourselves while you were communicating with them, that's the type of energy that is going to be released from that crystal or that form. So you want to use it in a spell that type of energy is conducive to. Again, unless you then imagine it changing into the desired form, which it's going to be less effective because it's been altered so many times. Each time you change an energy pattern, it's going to lose a little bit of its momentum. So it's best to any energy that you have drawn in to use to charge a spell that type of energy is conducive to. Okay, so I think that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you once again for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please take the opportunity to do so now. And until next time, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.